Good evening and welcome to not another edition of Splattercast. No, we are presenting you with our review of the new Idris Elba movie, Beast.
Don't you move, okay?
Where did he go?
This is definitely a Dylan movie. This is something that back in the day, I may have had to twist your arm a little bit harder, especially if we didn't have the podcast going to go see, I would say. Not
This is true.
so deep into the horror, more of an action kind of suspense film, maybe a little bit more of a thriller. But I think the best thing you can stamp on this movie is a classic creature feature. But with all that said, Luke, since you were the odd man out here, since we kind of can gather from maybe our little uh short that we released yesterday, my feelings a little bit about it. Luke, I want to know, how did you feel about Beast going into it, and how did you feel coming out of it?
I had my hesitations going into this. I wasn't really sure what to expect. Well, my expectations weren't positive. I figured, it was just going to be terrible CGI with really not too much of a story behind it, and really just banking on um, some wild kills, maybe a little more tongue in cheek than we're used to seeing Idris Elba and things. But I'll say, as the showtime drew near, I kind of got a little more open to it when I realized the director had done like something like Two Guns, which for me, I enjoy that film.
Hmm.
So I
It's a
was like,
fun
oh,
movie.
okay, so maybe I should be kind of a little more open minded here. And then finally going into the theater and sitting with it and coming out of the theater, I'll say I was pleasantly surprised with this one. I mean, I'll continue to give you a hard time on it just because that's what I do. But overall, I think there was a certain amount of quality in this film that did surprise me.
Yeah, no, I think that, kind of where I stand with it, if you guys have seen some of our content on the channel, so far we haven't gone too far deep down the creature feature rabbit hole that I would like to. As we continue on, we'll go there. I tend to, I'm a little more forgiving with you than I'm going to be as the months and years go on here with this. Because like there's a lot of stuff that I watch. I mean, if you check out my short series, Fast Food Frights, you already can see that I watch a ton of shark films, of varying quality and degree. But this one is just, when I saw the trailer initially, I was like, okay, cool. I was sold with just the fact that it's a killer lion. We don't get many of those movies very often. The one that I can point to is a movie called The Ghost in the Darkness, which, not a horror movie even in the slightest, but I think that there's a lot of great moments in it. If I can ever find a way to justify it and work it onto this channel, maybe in preparation for this, we could have done a video, but I want you to see that movie. Um, but I digress. I go back to this. It's a killer lion film. For whichever what reason, it's murdering people, and you got my man Idris Elba in it. So I love this guy. He's been on my radar for quite some time. I think he'd be a great choice for the new James Bond. I know that's been floating around for years. But I mean, really, where I think uh, one of my favorite roles from him in the last couple years was the last year's Suicide Squad.
Yes.
I thought he brought a lot of range and a lot of depth to that character. And again, I think in this movie, he's a great source of emotion. There's a lot of really great scenes towards the beginning of this movie that kind of have to set up, the family dynamic. So with this is your standard, typical, like I've said, creature feature where, you know, you have the guy, they're going on vacation, and you see all this in the trailer, so this isn't a spoiler, but they're going on vacation. They're meeting up with an old friend. There's some family drama going on from some stuff that happened. The kids kind of are estranged from their father a little bit, and they're just kind of trying to work it out. And there's a couple of moments towards the beginning here where they really give you that kind of dynamic, and they little let you play with it a little bit. I like the humanity that Idris Elba brings to this character. I like the emotion that he's able to express because he's not trying to be a hard ass. I think there's one line of dialogue in this movie that I know a few people in our theater chuckled at, and I really liked is, and I'll just say it completely out of context here so it doesn't spoil anything, but it's like, you don't know how to hotwire a car? Is no, I went to medical school. That's the kind of character we're dealing with here, where he is not trying to be this rough and tough guy. He is just wearing it on his shoulder and just showing you who exactly he is. And Idris Elba kills it. I think that, as far as all the acting goes, him, Charlotte Copley, and the two girls, I think everybody on here is doing their best. I think that some of the writing may, especially with a couple of the scenes with the girls, I think, does a little disservice to them. Maybe it doesn't come off the way they wanted it to. But I think Charlotte Copley and Idris Elba, they really do a great job with giving some more humanity to these characters and kind of really making you feel like they're real people.
Yeah, and I think that's where, um, going into like when we did the Abominable review and things like that, where those movies tend to be like, oh, they really tried to tell a story here in the midst of kind of like a random creature feature. In this one, I'll give even more gravitas to where there's a certain level of filmmaking here and it shines through. Um, but I will say, like the extra level of dimensions they try to give the family dynamic here sometimes, and I understand that the bread and butter of this film was the lion attack. That's what everyone came to see. But they also wanted to add dimensions to these characters. But I will say, like, where I'm a little harder on this film is, and I know that they had to pretty much front load a lot of that storytelling in the very beginning because we're going to get to the line attack, and right there you don't really necessarily get a lot of different conversation. Where it a lot of that kind of what we find out about the mother, the father's dynamic between him and his daughters, it really seems pretty heavy and almost like we get to it really right at the very beginning. And I'm like, I don't know if I would have jumped into it this quick. Maybe I've taken a little bit more time, especially realizing as we go through the film and me and you have sat through this film knowing what happens closer to the end. I think maybe we could have reworked the ending a little bit and kind of spent a little more time with the family, kind of easing into that dynamic. And then there is another scene, again, going back to the family dynamic in the midst of this that seems a little bit out of place, that seems kind of like they really wanted to throw that in there. And I think maybe it would have worked if this particular thing happens at nighttime. There's not as much tension around because maybe the threat isn't at least visually right there. So it's like, maybe that's a time for levity between the father and the daughter looking up at the stars, and maybe we get a conversation, just a certain memory, and then that leads into that certain issue that she kind of brings to the table continuously throughout this film. So I think maybe that kind of writing would have been a little bit better there in terms of maybe pace it out a little bit instead of kind of just blurting out some of these issues. But that didn't take me out of the film. It's just like when you add these extra dimensions into these characters, I want that well written because it means so much more, especially when these characters are going through what they're going through. But like the line attack, all that stuff for me, I think was played so well. There are legitimate moments of tension in this film, especially when, I mean, there's no secret they're stuck in a Jeep. So it's like, they play off that kind of claustrophobic tension very well in this. And especially, with all the windows and sometimes you get a look at the line before the characters do, you're just anticipating that kind of loud bang. I mean, we were sitting in the theater and you don't jump very much in movies ever.
No, I
And there was
don't.
one moment
No.
that got you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I legitimately jumped at a moment, and I think that's why it's like I have a lot of fun with these movies. I think like as far as anything when it comes to horror, I love my slashers to death. Like that's definitely one of my big points in this genre. I love my kind of Lovecraftian body horror films, but I fucking love my creature features, and I will say that. A monster movie, a good creature feature, that'll make me jump more than anything just because like especially with the settings and how they do handle it is like it just I don't know, something unsettles me about having a beast, whether it's a made up monster or a lion or a grizzly bear or something, just trying to eat you is just like one of the most unsettling things for me. And for this, like, if we're going to get into that aspect of the movie, we talked about the characters a little bit, we talked about the acting. Um, I think a lot of this works. I think that they this could have really been very ham-fisted. They could have really had a lot of the you know, lion effects and everything kind of take center stage. And I mean, you see the lion a lot, don't get me wrong, but they could have just really, spent most of the budget trying to get people on location and get the good actors into it. And you could have really fallen back with the CG. I don't think any of the CG in here, especially for our main lion, looks very poor. Like there's a couple of scenes, like I can think of one shot right towards the opening that I was a little worried when that happened. When that popped up, I was like, "Ooh, did we just see only the good parts in the trailer?" But there's a lot of really good stuff in this. Like I can think of a couple scenes involving a little, like kind of I guess it was a lake or like a little river that they were in, where you could see the lion kind of skulking about and stalking prey and stuff, and it looks really good. Um, and I gotta say, like, if you're gonna commit to a CGI lion and not really do any practical effects, like, you gotta make sure it looks tip top. And I think but with a few exceptions, I think that this movie definitely has serviceable effects for that because it's very effective. And the way they use the lion too, they have a sequence where they talk about you gotta look for the shadows. And that really plays with your mind a little bit. And I caught myself in a lot of scenes like you said, sometimes you'll see the line before the characters do. Really looking in the background of the like out this Jeep and other set pieces that we see in the movie. I'm looking for this thing because
Yeah.
it's like it could just be stalking around out there.
And that's where it's like, you spend almost the entire time of this film on alert. You know what I mean? There's
Mhm.
never a sense of ease throughout this entire film, and that's hard to kind of keep up with an audience, especially nowadays. So it's like, I applaud the director and writers for trying to build that because they successfully did it. It's always like you're looking for that next thing, even when maybe you think we've come to a resolution and then it's not so much. It's like you're always expecting that. So I think that was really well done. And just going back to those visuals, a lot of the nighttime shots in this I thought were really great.
Oh yeah.
Especially
Mhm.
like you were saying by the water. There's a particular one where Idris Elba in the tree. I really felt that kind of sense of tension in there, especially when he's hiding throughout the kind of little I don't know if it'd be called a pond or whatever, but where he's in the actual water a lot of the time while the lion is kind of roaming about and he's trying to stay away from it. I think that was all so well done. Also, I kind of wanted to bring up that dynamic of, the main dynamic here is Idris Elba versus a lion. But one of the big moments of tension for me were when more human beings show up and maybe,
Oh
not
yeah.
so great human beings. So it's like you never know what kind of threat is looming in the nighttime. And I love that they kind of brought that dynamic. And then also bringing that dynamic of why the lion is doing what he is doing.
Mhm.
And you can kind of see his point of view from everything. So,
Yes.
it's kind of like one of those things where choose a side, where every side makes sense really to an extent. So I really like that they brought those dynamics here. There is this such a sense of a gray area in this film where you can really get behind any of the characters. So I thought that was very intriguing. They really set out, I feel, to do not just some sort of random creature feature here. This was really a film that was pretty well thought out, and they wanted to bring that sense of gravitas. This is like I know we had talked about when we done the Note review, and I said it felt like an adventure film like Jaws, like almost he wanted to make Jaws in the sky. Now it's like I feel like a lot of filmmakers do become obsessed with trying to make that next Jaws film. And I'll say like this one to an extent kind of felt like a Jaws film, where it's like, but in the desert or in Africa and
On the
that in the
savannah. Yeah.
yeah. So it's like I thought that was a very interesting dynamic here.
I mean, you're gonna get that a lot because I mean, if you're talking creature features, that's one of the pinnacle
Yeah.
really the one that you strive for to try to meet. And yeah, it's an easy film to point to for this as far as a comparison because they do a really good job with the tension. I'd say that's probably my biggest highlight. I like that. I like the chemistry between characters. Um, if I had to say a couple things that I kind of wanted a little more from, with and it's probably because I've seen so many of these movies and I'm so accustomed to them that it might be a little bit of a weird want. So this could just be a me thing, but I could have used maybe another 10 to 15 minutes on this movie. It's a brisk 93 minutes. But I really would have liked to have a little bit more build up to the actual events that take place. I thought that the stuff in the village was brilliant. I really liked that. I thought that how they revealed all that and kind of you talk about the gravitas in the filmmaking here. Did you catch that there was a great deal of this film that was it seems like they were either one takes or simulated one takes. I don't know if they were necessarily full. They could have been covering it up with CG, but they really chose to shoot this movie where it's like a lot of the action, and I can think of a specific scene under a truck or under the Jeep where it is just the camera moving back and forth and back and forth, and they don't cut. They really, I think, kind of use that to kind of ground you into the tension and kind
Yeah.
of bring you into those moments. So it's like, you talked about in Nope how it's like, in Jaws, he has the luxury of hiding under the water, and you can kind of use that to your advantage to build tension. This is another film where they don't really have that, but I think the smart technique of using these long takes to kind of make you sit with the situation rather than just quick cutting everything really, I think, adds to the suspense. And I think
Yes.
really it makes it a more elevated experience, I guess is what I would best say.
And going into that scene under the truck, I mean, the the kind of going back and forth from either side of the truck and being that close to that threat, I think was so well done. I mean, it gets your
Mhm,
heart pumping. There are so many elements in this film that get your heart pumping. And going into those one shots, what I really noticed is I know you had said you would have loved another extra 15 minutes. For me, this movie sat right. Like
mhm.
I know, like, we're in that kind of long string right now where a lot of films are pushing that 2-hour mark, and, like, when you had told me going into this, it was 93 minutes, I was like, I was looking forward to that, you know what I mean? Where it's like, "Let me see what this film does with 93 minutes here," because we don't see that often
And
anymore.
like I said, that's a me thing. I just tend
Yeah,
to really like build up to these kind of things. I think like with that extra 15 minutes we could have added to those human characters you alluded to a little bit more.
yeah,
And the maybe, seeing some of that stuff with the village before they stumble across it. Things like that that just I think you could have it's more those classic tropes that I look for in this stuff, and it's again, it's because that's where my taste is designed for these things. I'm so forgiving of them. So I understand why they wouldn't do it here, why they told the story the way they told it, because I think it will work better for a general audience. I think
yeah.
kind of shying away from tropes like that and letting the story unfold naturally is the best way for it. So, you know, like I said, I'm not saying that that's the right call, but that's the call I would have liked.
And going into those one takes you were talking about it, I really noticed it at the very beginning when they get off the plane and they're kinda going into the little area waiting on their friend, and
It's in a lot, yeah.
it's really very much like a go, go, go type situation, you know? So it's like in that moment, Idris Elba sitting there with his daughters, and the next minute, um, their uncle shows up, and then we're off and moving. And that really gets that sense of we're moving. This film is moving. We're not taking that much time. But it's like one of those credit to the filmmaker where sometimes films seem rushed. It's that real fine line where it's like this film's moving, but it doesn't feel rushed, and that's
Mm,
what this film feels like. So, I think that was really well done. I think they kind of wanted to get off and running. So I understand again where I was critiquing them with that front loading that story. I know
mhm.
that that was necessary evil in a sense. I wish they would have slowed it down, especially when they're stuck in the Jeep. I think there were moments kind of right there where kind of, kind hash out your issues because hey, you're stuck in an enclosed space and there's nothing else to do. I think there were a couple elements for that. But I mean, overall, I was pretty pleased with this film.
Oh yeah. I think, this is definitely one of those kind of mid to late summer popcorn flicks that I think you can go to and you can have a lot of fun. I put this on the same level as Alexander Aja's Crawl from a few
Yes.
years ago. It's very much that there's a level of quality to it, but at the end of the day, just know what you're going into. You're going into a movie where in the third act, yes, you see it in the trailer, Idris Elba's fighting a lion. And it's brutal, it's visceral. What shocked me, I guess I could lay another small critique on this film, is that it's rated R, but I feel like there were a couple moments of violence they really strayed away from showing. And is it intentional? Maybe because they want to do that, kinda like let your mind race a little bit on what you're seeing, but especially towards the end, with kind of the resolution of the film, that's all I'll say. I was surprised where the camera, laid on, because you
Yeah.
would think that would be kinda the money shot that you'd wanna see.
You
It's
know,
not disappointing. I think it
yeah.
works thematically, but it's one of those things where I'm just kinda like, that was a mature kinda something I did not expect from this movie.
Yeah, especially with the way that it's what is phrased at the closer to the beginning when it ends up being kind of a descriptor, and how kind of a much of a vicious descriptor it is that they kind of shied away from the actual visual aspect of it. But on the other hand, we're dealing with a lot of CGI here, so it's
Yes,
like, do we want to try and go that extra mile, or do we run the risk of this being dated? Because it's like right now when we talk about CGI, and I'm like, well, I probably can't watch this in a year because it's going to be dated. This one, I feel like Beast is, I mean, eventually it will feel dated just because of how technology is. But this one, I feel like is going to last,
because of
several,
the
several
restraint
years.
that they had
Yeah,
in some
so
of their
I think it was really well done, but I think maybe they didn't wanna push. So they're like, "You know what? It looks good here. We're not gonna go that extra mile and get a little wild with it, so let's just kinda shy away from it. Let's do more so off-screen stuff." So I think maybe that was in the filmmaker's head a little bit, but yeah, for me, I noticed that as well, but I'm not gonna try and give it too much of a strike on that one.
yeah. But yeah, I would say again, this is a great end of the summer popcorn flick. If you are into these kind of movies, just know what you're getting into because yes, this is through and through, an excellent creature feature, really well executed, better than I think we even anticipated the movie being. And I think that it's definitely worth your time. I could see myself picking this up on Blu-ray, at least watching this a few more times just to throw on, just because
Yeah.
I think it would be in my rotation with like a Crawl or like a Jaws 2 or something like that, like just when I want to watch something that's going to get my heart racing a little bit. I think this movie services that perfectly. But is this a high art film? Is this one of the greatest horror action films of all time? Absolutely not. So just know what you're getting into, and I think if you go into that with those expectations, you will have a great deal of fun with this movie.
Yeah. And that's where, they didn't really play into that tongue and cheek nature here where, the whole marketing was Idris Elba punching a lion. Even when it comes to that, it's not even something where you're looking at saying, oh my gosh, they really went this route. It does feel real. Just like that whole kind of that one little scene taken out of context can make you think that this film is very, very tongue in cheek. And that's
How to
honestly
sell a
how
movie,
yeah,
but
and that's how I was feeling, going into it, but they don't really play into that at all. This is, more of a serious film, I would say. You really feel that threat. You're on the edge of your seat. So like this one is, if it's streaming, if you feel like picking it up on Blu-ray, I don't think you can go wrong.
absolutely. But yeah, guys, that's about going to do it here for us with our Beast review. Are you going to check this one out this weekend? Let us know down below in the comments. You can also find us on our social media, always at SplattercastPod, where you can basically catch up with us and let us know what you thought if you want to on there, as well as keep up with our day to day and our normal activity and see what we're up to and what we're watching, what we're talking about. As well as you can catch our podcasts and a couple, yeah, just our podcasts right now on Spotify, Apple Music, Stitcher, and all the other spots where your podcasts are found. Yeah, again, if you're going to be checking this out, please let us know. As well as if you thought we did a good job here, you think you like the content on the channel, you think we deserve it, hit that subscribe button for us. It does a lot for us to kind of get those numbers going and kind of get the algorithm stimulated as we're growing the channel here. Yeah, this was definitely a fun one for me. I'm really happy that this turned out as positive as it did, because I knew a week out from this, talking about it on the Sunday Scaries, I was like, this is either going to be a really fun, mutual, nice conversation, or this is going to be I really liked it, and you were going to be like, this movie garbage. So
Yeah.
I'm
That
happy
one's
that
still in
we.
my back pocket. Yeah, I'm waiting for you to disappoint me so I can just totally roast you on here.
I know it's gonna take some time. I don't know. I don't even know what the next big creature feature coming out is. Seems like we're getting about one a year now,
Yeah,
and I think that's good. I like that. Mid July to early August, give me something, whether it's an alligator, a shark, a lion, a bear. Give me something ripping some people apart in the theater, and I usually have a pretty good time.
of course you do, you sicko.
I know. I love it. Alrighty, guys. Well, that's going to do it for us here. So take it easy.